What's going on, everybody? This is Team Field coming back at you with a brand new video, and this is one that I've been particularly excited about for a good long while now, and this is my first film review. I couldn't think of a better time for it to come than the month of October. It's my favorite month of the year. It's the one month of the year where it's nothing but horror films in my household, and I can't almost think of a better film to do for my first review than the 1996 Wes Craven classic Scream. I mean, this is one of those films, guys, that there's nothing else that can be said that hasn't been said already. I mean, Scream really reinvented the game of horror, because, I mean, by the time 1996 came around, the horror genre was really in a dead spot. You had a couple of films here and there that kept people invested to a degree, but it wasn't until Scream came along in 1996 that the game was completely reinvented. You had almost a whole new subgenre of meta horror, and I think we owe a lot to this film, and there's so many things about this film that I could gush about, but I think the biggest thing that I will credit Scream for right off the bat, besides reinventing the horror genre, is the dichotomy that this film presented. This was really a film that was made for, on one side of the coin, it was made for fans who are diehard, longtime fans of the horror genre, who remember the classic films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, etc. But this was also a film that was made for people who basically had written horror off, that horror was just a secondary genre that nobody should ever pay attention to. This was a film made for those people to kind of bring them back to the horror genre, to bring horror back to its former glory. But among the other things, as obviously, the acting is great. This gave birth to one of the most iconic final girls in horror film history, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. I'm going to go out on maybe somewhat of a controversial opinion and say that Sidney Prescott is my favorite final girl of all time. Yes, being the Halloween fan, I even put her above Jamie Lee Curtis, which is, a little weird to say, but, that's just my opinion. Some things that people won't entirely pick up on with the character Sidney Prescott is all this underlying backstory to her. I mean, you obviously have the backstory of her mother, Maureen Prescott, and the whole backstory to her that led to the events of this entire film, really. But besides Sidney, there's so many other great characters. Like, you have Randy is supposed to be kind of like the representation of us, the horror fans. He knows all the classic films. He knows all these rules, so to speak, on how to survive a horror movie, which is one of my favorite little scenes of this film. You got Dewey, played by David Arquette, Courtney Cox playing Gail Weathers, and only reason I've ever really paid attention to Courtney Cox outside of this franchise was the TV show Friends, because that's my favorite show of all time. That's where I know her from. Then you have the titular killers of Billy and Stu. And I kind of find it weird that for some reason or another, after Scream, Skeet Ulrich didn't really go anywhere after this, even though he was in one of the most influential horror films ever made. Weird to see he didn't really go anywhere after this, but yet Matthew Lillard went somewhere after this. We know him in Scooby-Doo and other films that he's known for, so that's always kind of fascinating me, and kind of not to really kind of jump around a little too much, but one of my favorite aspects of the film itself is the whole execution of the reveal of Stu and Billy being the killers, because although I do feel that they kind of went a little too far with trying to make it seem like these two weren't the killers, or mainly just that aspect with Billy, I thought the overall execution of the final reveal got to a point where it was still very shocking and just kind of pulling the rug out from underneath you. I mean, yeah, it was a little bit of an on-the-nose reveal when Billy shot Randy, giving the whole reference to the classic line from Anthony Perkins' Psycho, we all go a little mad sometimes. Like, yeah, that might be a little bit on the nose, but I still thought, Skeet pulled that off as perfectly as he could have. And then I actually thought Stu's reveal was a little bit more subtle and a little bit more of a surprise. Because, you know, Sydney goes to run away, then she runs into Stu, and you think, oh, Stu's gonna go against his best friend. And it's like, oh, nope, another moment where they just pull the rug out from underneath. And I thought that whole section, that whole sequence was really well done. And as much as I've kind of enjoyed the fact that each film in the franchise has had a different killer every time, I'm kind of curious as to how the franchise might have turned out if you would have kept Billy and Stu as like your titular duo killers. But that's just kind of a little bit of a curiosity of mine. But arguably the biggest other positive that I can get from this film really is the opening sequence. Because, you know, not a lot of horror fans, I'm sure, were expecting an A-list actress like Drew Barrymore to star in a horror film. Because no matter how many great horror films we've had, and no matter how hailed, quote-unquote, the horror genre is by some, the general movie fans have always looked down on horror as like a secondary genre. Because, you know, there's bad acting, characters making dumb decisions, you know, all these cliches that kind of push the horror genre down. Like I said, it's a secondary genre. So when you see an actress like Drew Barrymore, where it's like, oh, this is going to add some legitimacy to the genre again. And to a degree, it definitely did. And it was also very shocking to see that not only did she have a role in a horror film, but she gets taken out right in the opening sequence. And let me just take a minute or two to really give credit to this opening sequence. Now, it's not my favorite opening sequence in horror history. It's not even my favorite opening in this franchise, as weird as that's going to sound. But I think this definitely kind of set the standard for how to just really kick a movie off with a punch, because you can make the case that this is in the conversation for not only the greatest opening to any horror film, but the greatest opening to any film ever. It definitely earns that title. Because, you know, it kind of just starts off as, you know, a teenager's she's got the house to herself, her parents are away, she's getting ready to watch a horror film, and, you know, it turns into this whole just creepy and unsettling cat and mouse game between killer and victim. And just the way you kind of have the back and forth when Ghostface tells her, oh, I want to see what your insides look like, I want to know who I'm looking at. The only negative I really have with that scene in particular, which is kind of an overlying negative or nitpick that I have with the film as a whole, as the whole timing believability that they have. Because obviously she turns the patio lights back on and her boyfriend Steve is strapped to a chair. And then within not even a matter of seconds, after the lights go off again, you hear a sound of him basically getting, you know, disemboweled. And then the patio lights come back on, and, you know, there's nobody around him. So it's like, how would anyone be able to kind of pull off that extravagant of a kill and just basically dart off screen and not be seen? It's like, it really kind of plays with your believability to a degree. And it's like, you couldn't have stabbed the guy in the shoulder and have him run away without the girl seeing the guy dart off. You know. But then again, as the scene rolls on, you know, you forget about it, you invest yourself into hopefully this girl makes it, and you kind of feel bad when she doesn't. Just the dialogue especially just really gets you encapsulated and investing you in whether or not this girl's going to survive. And I don't know, so I can't gush enough about it. And then to kind of add on top of that, the girl's parents finally come home, you know, and they go in just off to the side, they don't see her, which, that's another little nitpick you could throw, is that for a girl who's basically getting butchered right there when her parents are coming home, you know, she didn't really try hard enough to get their attention. But You know, it's nevertheless a tragic death to have the mother listen to her daughter being killed on the phone, and then to have the mom and dad find her being gutted, hanging from a tree is nothing short of tragic. And this whole opening is so iconic, and it really set the standard because, you know, like I said, it's a great cat and mouse game. The dialogue from Ghostface especially is bone chilling and unsettling, very much so. And, you know, the imagery of the daughter hanging from the tree, gutted out, is very disturbing, to say the least, especially if you put yourself in those parents' positions. And, you know, another enjoyable aspect is obviously, you know, the whole whodunit storyline. Now, like I said before, they went a little too far to kind of try to sell you that these certain characters weren't the killers, and, you know, they weren't involved. Like the scene when the first back and forth between Sidney and Ghostface, you know, it wasn't as iconic as it was with Drew Barrymore, but still, it's right up there. And nothing, as soon as Ghostface kind of disappears and he's off screen, that Billy just kind of happens to show up, and you kind of have to ask yourself, you know, his cell phone dropped out of his pocket or out of his hand, wherever he had it. Now you kind of have to wonder, was that intentional? Was he doing that to intentionally kind of set off that it wasn't him? Or do you have to ask yourself, was Billy the killer? And then as soon as he went to run away, the cops show up and he kind of slithered his way back in just to further dispute that it wasn't him. It goes to this whole kind of mind-bending trickery to make you really wonder. So I like that part, but I wasn't really too big of a fan of just kind of how far they went with it, really. But, you know, luckily for them, it really paid off in the end, to where it was actually still a surprise when Billy was revealed as a killer. So I guess I can't really harp on it too much. Another great thing about this film was kind of like the pacing of it. You know, it starts off with that really morbid, just adrenaline pumping opening, and then it simmers down a little bit. It kind of gets you into Sidney Prescott as your main character. It gets you into, you know, the other characters and the whole dichotomy between the characters, and then it just kind of finders along slowly but surely. You get kills here and there, and then obviously you get to the end, and it's all just like no holds barred. Like I said, adrenaline pumping, where characters are getting killed left, right, and sideways. So I thought the pacing of that was done really well. I love the references in the movie, like Billy's reference to the classic Anthony Perkins line in Psycho. I like the fact that the film that the teenagers are watching at the party is Halloween, because obviously, you know, Halloween's my favorite film of all time, so any reference to Halloween is perfectly okay with me. The only slight nitpick I'll have when they're watching Halloween on the TV is that they kind of jump really weirdly in certain scenes of the movie. Like, they're watching the scene where Bob gets stabbed up against the cupboard, and then as soon as Billy goes to get up to explain the rules and he pauses the TV, Michael has the knife up to stab him again. So they have these weird little jumps, you know, in between the film, and it's odd. But other than that, you know, any reference to Halloween is more than fine with me. I actually liked how they thought of a somewhat of a creative way for the teenagers to leave the party because of the kill of Henry Winkler, you know, the principal. Because, you know, they had to think of some way to get the rest of the characters out of there, so it could just be the main characters left. And out of all the things they could have chosen, I thought they chose the best option. But so many things about this film, guys, that I could just absolutely gush about. I know, I thought the characters are iconic. You know, Sidney Prescott being one of the most iconic final girls in horror. Randy kind of being, you know, the representation of us horror fans, you know, being the horror geeks. So many iconic scenes that will stand the test of time. You know, like the opening scene, the whole third act with Stu and Billy being revealed. Even the first back and forth between Sidney and Ghostface. You know, so many things about this film that's just iconic. You know, a few negatives here and there, like, you know, the timing believabilities, like, even the bathroom scene between Sydney and Ghostface, you know, you have to ask yourself, like, how long was Billy or Stu sitting in there for? Were they're gonna dedicate the entire day just to find out if Sydney went in that bathroom or not? And then, you know, just little nitpicks here and there, like, you know, when Tatum and Sydney are talking about the past of Sydney's mother, and you see Ghostface just kind of dart off to the side in the woods. Like, you don't think anybody would notice a guy wearing a black costume with a white mask, or when he goes in the grocery stores. Like, it's really hard for me to believe that's something that nobody's really going to notice, but nevertheless, it's just a minor nitpick. The film doesn't hinder on that. Like I said, there's really not many negatives I have with this film, really, except for, like, minor nitpicks. Because I think, for considering what this film did for the genre, and the everything that it launched, from Neve Campbell's career, Courtney Cox's career, and so many other things, that I think this film deserves all the credit that it receives. So, overall, guys, you know, like I said, you know, I love this film to death. It gave birth to an iconic franchise in horror, an iconic final girl, an iconic killer in Ghostface, because I think that look of Ghostface will stand the test of time, and it will never get too old for fans to really appreciate. I mean, Ghostface was never really portrayed as a convincing, you know, larger-than-life killer. I mean, it's more so the look that's iconic more than the killer itself, but nevertheless, no. Overall, guys, I'm going to give this movie a 9.2 out of 10. Like I said, most of the little things you have in those deductions is the timing believabilities, you know. I think Gale Weathers is a little bit obnoxious as a character, especially for this first film. But, you know, not every character is going to be a home run, I guess. But thank you guys so much for listening to this. You know, I think this was a long time coming. Like I said, I don't think I could have picked a better time to do my first film review than the month of October, which is a month that's always very special to me. And thank you guys so very much for listening. You know, hit that like button, share and subscribe, whatever social media platform you can on. And look forward to my Scream 2 review, which I will be coming out with very soon. And I will see you guys next time.